Hey, folks, and welcome into episode 13 of the Longhorn Mailbag. Looks a little bit different today. We've got our good friend Jeff Howe of Horns 24/7 joining us for the mailbag today. Thanks for all for tuning in, answering your questions, starting off with our weekly True-False segment coming out of the bye week against Houston. So, Jeff, welcome to True-False. We'll go with 5 true-false questions from our good friend Ranger's dad over on the horns247.com board. Starting off, number 1, Jonathan Brooks will go over 200 yards rushing. Your thoughts?
I'm going to say false, but he will get his fifth 100-yard game. Houston, Tommy, there's not a whole lot they do well defensively. I just think it's a really good week probably to get the passing game figured out, and especially some of your red zone issues. So I think Jonathan Brooks goes over 100 again, but I don't think he gets to 200 quite there.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm gonna go false with you as well here. Jonathan Brooks is running the ball really well, but I agree. I think this is a game where Steve Sarkisian wants to implement the passing game a little bit more, and especially flex his muscles in the red zone, an area where they've struggled so far this season. And that kind of leads into our second true false question, which is: does Quinn Ewers pass for 3 touchdowns or more?
I say yes. One of the things Texas actually does really well in the red zone, and we saw them try to do it against Oklahoma, was go to their RPO stuff. And they tried to hit Jatavian Sanders with one. It's just whether Quinn got the ball there late or JT didn't make as strong of a catch as he probably would have if he were 100%, whatever the case was, and then ended up being a turnover with Oklahoma getting an interception. So, but I think between the using RPOs in the red zone as a weapon there, plus I watched West Virginia, and I've watched a lot of other teams hit deep shot after deep shot on Houston. Think about this, Tommy. Houston's next to last in the conference, and they rank in the 90s nationally in terms of 10 plus plays of 10 plus yards of given up. They've given up 97 plays this season of 10 yards or more. So Texas will be able to hit some shots this week. I think Quinn Ewers is going over 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm going to go true here as well. It was kind of either or for me with the Jonathan Brooks or Quinn Ewers one for when it comes to offensive success. I think, like you mentioned, big plays are going to be huge for Texas in this one. They want to make a statement coming out of a bye week and a loss 2 weeks prior to Oklahoma, and this is a good chance again for Steve Sarkisian to show that he can score in the red zone. Number 3, the defense for Texas will find a way to get a touchdown on the board or a score. So I guess you could count a safety there as well, or a block punt. Jeff?
I'm going to say false just because this defense the last few weeks, the last few games rather, hasn't done that great of a job at forcing turnovers. I do think U of H is going to put the ball in the air more than Oklahoma did because they're going to have to. I think they'll throw it more than Kansas did because Donovan Smith's more of a capable quarterback throwing the football than Jason Bean. But I think this Texas group, Tommy, specifically the guys up the middle of the field, Jalen Ford and the linebackers, throw Janae Barron in there, even the safeties, those guys between the hash marks, they've got to do a much better job of attacking the football, making a play on the ball, being in a position to make a play on the ball. So I'd settle for just a couple forced turnovers if I'm a Texas fan, not get too hung up on the defense putting 6 on the board.
Jeff, I'm going to disagree with you here. I think the defense does find a way to score in this game. You mentioned how they haven't been able to find the turnovers as of late. I think this is a game they do it, and I think this is a game that they do it in statement fashion. Houston is a team that, with Donovan Smith at the helm, who Texas fans probably don't want to remember from the upset loss against Texas Tech last year, they know very well. So I think they're going to disrupt the passing lanes a little bit, get some pass breakups, and I think someone can get a pick 6 out of this game. Only one, I believe. No, one or two pick 6s this year. I can't remember off the top of my head for Texas. I think they find another one on Saturday against Houston.
I will say this. One of the things U of H actually does really well is they do take care of the football. They're one of the best teams. I think they're 8th in the country in turnover margin. They've only turned it over 3 times this year. So, it's hard to go conservative against Texas because you can't run the ball at Texas very successfully. But as conservative as you can be, as Dana Holgerson could be, protecting the ball probably will be paramount for U of H. So the longer they can stay within a score or two and make it to where they don't have to put the ball in kind of do or die situations, put it in a position where it could be a 50-50 ball. I think Houston wants that kind of game as long as they can get it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That would have to be the recipe for success for the Cougars, I would think. And that transitions into number 4. Speaking of Houston, will they have under 300 yards of total offense?
No, I mean, Donovan Smith could throw for 300 in this game. I don't think it means Houston's going to win the football game. But you've got to go path of least resistance against Texas to move the football. Even Oklahoma didn't line up and just pound Texas running the ball. They were able to use their quarterback run game, their draws, kind of use Texas aggressiveness and their speed to their advantage. And Texas was undisciplined in their rush lanes and, everything that everybody's talked about coming out of the Oklahoma game. But Houston's got a really good group of receivers. Matthew Golden's at the top of that list. I know he had a hamstring injury against West Virginia, so we'll see kind of what shape he's in. But I think Donovan Smith by himself is going to go over 300. But at the end of the day, unless Texas just kind of boots the ball all over the place, Tommy, I don't know that it's going to matter in terms of the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm going to go false here as well with you, Jeff. And you mentioned the guy who I think is going to be a big reason why, and that's Matthew Golden. I think this is a guy who's just been waiting to explode onto the scene. I covered him in high school, and now seeing him at Houston, he's great in the special teams game as well. I believe he housed a kickoff return last week against West Virginia as well. I think he's Houston's best receiver, period, on that roster, which, and like you mentioned, they do have a really good group all around, but he's their best guy. If the ball gets in his hands, he's dangerous. I think he certainly helps that. And like we've talked about a little bit already, Donovan Smith knows the Texas defense from playing them last year, so I think he has a little bit more of an edge up against some of the other quarterbacks that Texas has played this year. So I'm going false there. And that leads into our last one, sticking with the quarterback theme. Malik Murphy will take snaps at quarterback at some point in this game, Jeff.
I'm going to say not only does Malik Murphy take snaps in this game, I think after the bye week at TCU Stadium on Saturday, I think we see Arch Manning make his Texas debut, even if it's for a series at the end of the game. I think you're at the point, Tommy, where if you get a comfortable lead, I think getting Quinn Ewers out of harm's way supersedes the need to kind of work stuff out on offense. So the quicker you can get Quinn Ewers out of the game, if you're Sark and AJ Milwee, the better. So I think not only do we see Malik Murphy, I think we see Arch this week make his debut. Like I said, even if it's for a series, they've got 6 regular season games to go and 4 to burn his red 4 that he can play without burning a red shirt. So I think it's Arch Manning time.
Well, I'm going to go true here that we see Malik Murphy. I don't know if I'm going to go as far to say as we see Arch Manning, just because I'm 0 for 2 on Arch Manning appearance predictions this year. So he's going to have to prove me wrong first before I turn the corner on that one. But I do think this is a game where Texas will get to a point where Quinn Ewers can comfortably be taken out of the game, and we see some more snaps from Malik Murphy. Now we're going to go into two pressing questions coming out of the bye week here for Texas. We'll let Jeff answer everything first. Number one, 6 games left on the schedule. Texas has one of the easier remaining schedules by rankings wise in the country remaining. But that doesn't mean they're out of harm's way yet completely. Some sleeper teams left on the schedule for sure. Which opponent, if any, concerns you the most heading into the back end of the season, Jeff?
I think the two that should give Texas fans maybe a little bit of pause. I don't know if any of them really concern you, but I think Kansas State and TCU, just because you look at both of them last time out, Tommy, I wonder if both of them have found something going to a different quarterback. And quarterback run game, it's not anything against Pete Kwiatkowski's defense specifically. QB run game is just something everybody has trouble with. It's that extra hat that the defense has to account for. And if you've got a real legit run threat at that position, it's really hard to account for that guy every snap. But I think you look at what Josh Hoover did for TCU against BYU, kind of elevating that offense a little bit. Maybe they found their guy now that can keep them going. It just seemed to be kind of hit or miss with Chandler Morris at quarterback. So maybe his injury providing this opportunity for Josh Hoover is something that TCU can use to spin forward. And then I think with Avery Johnson at Kansas State, you're talking about a guy that as a recruit had elite speed at the quarterback position. And, we saw Colin Klein and Chris Kleiman use that wisely in Lubbock last weekend. Texas Tech wasn't ready for as much as they saw of Avery Johnson, and he gashed Tech in the second half a couple of times with K-State. That game was close for a while. K-State ended up pulling away late. So I think those two teams, more so K-State, I keep going back to the Chris Kleiman factor. He's won the Big 12 title. He's done about everything he can do at K-State other than get them to the playoff, except the one thing he hasn't done at K-State is he hasn't beaten Texas. He's 0 for Texas in his time in Manhattan. Lost his first one in 2019. They got blown out during the COVID year, and then lost a couple of close games in 2021 and then last season in Manhattan. So I feel like the law of averages says, man, at some point, maybe Chris Kleiman gets Texas. It's looking like it probably won't be this year, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me being superstitious, Tommy, and just reading too much into things to say that maybe the guy is due for a win over Texas. But for those two reasons and those litany of reasons with K-State, it's Kansas State and TCU for me.
Well, initially at the start of the season, I had picked Kansas State as the second game that Texas was going to lose, and I think that's definitely still on my radar, especially now with Avery Johnson taking over the helm. We saw 5 rushing touchdowns out of him last season, none through the air, all from a freshman quarterback too, by the way. So really impressive showing there, especially with Will Howard struggling the way he is. Jeff, you and I have talked about this a lot, even coming into the season. And initially, during the start, after losing to Ohio University, not Ohio State, Ohio University, I tried to turn my head away, but Matt Campbell's turning my head back to Ames, Iowa. This is a team that has gotten better every single week that they've played. Matt Campbell, somehow, some way, I talked about this on the second half preview video on Horns 24/7's YouTube channel a couple of days ago. They always find a way to just somehow win games and keep composed. The gambling issues were such a huge hit for them offensively when they lost Hunter Deckers at quarterback, and they struggled through the first couple weeks of the season, but they're still playing well. Ames, Iowa is a place where Texas has mightily struggled when they've played there. They lost 3 out of the last 4. It was even close last time they played Iowa State in Austin. Really, an Xavier Hutchinson drop pass away from Iowa State walking away with a victory, I think, in Austin last year. So now, this is a team that I'm keeping my eye on, and it does come later on in the season, so we'll learn a lot more about the Cyclones from now to when Texas plays them. But certainly a sneaky team that could come up and nip Texas if they're not prepared accordingly. And now our last question that we'll touch on here, Jeff. What was the biggest issue that Texas needed to fix during the bye week? And I have an idea of where you're going with this already.
I think it's twofold, and I think obviously you got to start offensively and look at the red zone issues. Texas, Sark said it on Monday during the press conference, and I wholeheartedly believe him. Texas moves the ball too well up to the point of getting into the red zone. They're too talented to be as inept as they are when they get inside the 20. Part of me thinks it's maybe a lack of identity. Last year, whether it was Roschon Johnson and the Wildcat or just figuring out a different way to get Bijan Robinson the football, when Texas got in the red zone last year, they kind of knew where their bread was buttered, and then they could go off of Bijan and Roschon and figure out other matchups. I think Sark is still trying to figure that out. I know the Savion Red factor is really big, and everybody wants to see him involved in some red zone offense. But I do wonder, I think it's got to be as a traditional running back. And do you do that at the expense of Jonathan Brooks? And I think you have to put him in that traditional running back role, just because I don't think Sark really is all that interested in taking the ball out of Quinn Ewer's hands in the red zone. So I think there's been a lot for Sark to think through. It's not for a lack of talent. It's not that, Sark suddenly just loses his mind down in the red zone, but I think they need to find an identity, and hopefully they found one during the bye week. I think that's the biggest thing. Defensively, I think it's your 2-minute drives at the end of the half and at the end of the game. That's pretty much, Tommy, where Texas lost the Oklahoma game, was allowing a field goal late in the half, right before halftime, and then giving up, obviously, the touchdown at the end of the game. Specifically against Oklahoma, they didn't tackle well. They faced a lot of coverage busts, and maybe it's the tempo that Oklahoma was using. And when you're in your 2-minute drill, you're going to run tempo. Maybe it's that threw Texas off a little bit, but whatever it was, as long as Texas can play really good defense at the end of the half and at the end of the game, I think they'll be fine. There's not a whole lot that really concerns me about this defense in terms of like systemic issues that we've talked about in the past. I just think they've got to clean up end of half and end of game play.
Yeah, Jeff, I think your point on the defense was good, but like you said, I don't really see that as a concern. My concern aligns with your offensive point, which is the red zone. I mean, simply put, if Texas wants to be a serious, not just Big 12 championship contender, but college football playoff contender, they have to score in the red zone. They have to convert. You can't just settle for field goals all the time, and you can't turn the ball over either there, especially when, against Oklahoma, when they ended up going for it on 4th and 1 from the 1-yard line, and the Sooners end up pulling off a stand, keeping Xavier Worthy out of the end zone. That just can't happen, especially in a marquee game like Oklahoma, and there are going to be more marquee games for Texas down the line if they keep winning. So that issue by far is the biggest one that needed to be resolved for me in the bye week if Texas wants to be serious about contending for a Big 12 title and beyond. And that's going to conclude our 13th episode of the Longhorn Mailbag, very special edition. Once again, thanks so much for Jeff Howe taking the time to join us today. As always, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you're the first to know when new content heads your way. For Jeff and the rest of the crew at Horns 24/7, my name's Tommy Yarrish. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.